Okay, I think we might ruffle some feathers with this one today. Today, I'm also going to just be holding the mic and we're going to see how the audio sounds. So, thank you guys for your patience and your understanding with me and just all of the trials and the learning curves that come with sharing videos on the internet and learning how to edit and all of these things. It's been a joy, it's been a trial at times, and I appreciate your understanding. Now, today's video is going to be mostly a rant. I don't have a ton of notes like I usually do. And so, without further ado, let's get right on into it. Can Christian girls wear bikinis? That is the question for today. Of course, they can. I can answer that easily. Should they is a whole other conversation, one that we're going to try to unpack today. I am just going to come out and say it might shock some of you, but I do believe that there are certain cases and certain scenarios that it is okay for the Christian woman to wear a bikini if she so chooses. Now, I'm just going to warn you before you leave a rage comment that today I'm going to be playing a little bit of the devil's advocate role, and I want to offer a rebuttal as to why I believe that modesty can and should be a virtue for the Christian woman, while I think it's okay and permissible at times for the Christian woman to wear a bikini if she so chooses. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so I recently just got back from vacation. I was somewhere warm. I got to spend lots of time on the beach and in the sun, and it was lovely. And I feel like I just need to clear my name off the hop in saying that I did not wear a bikini on this trip. I haven't worn a bikini in years. I just don't desire to. I think this is a shared universal experience that as we get older, whether it is just maturity doing its work or it's spiritual maturity in itself, that I just don't feel as comfortable wearing a bikini. I don't feel as comfortable wearing certain things as I once did. And swimsuits and beach etiquette is so interesting. My mom and I are talking about this and just how things have shifted so much even since I was a kid and what people wear to the beach. I do not remember it ever being appropriate for girls to show up at the beach wearing essentially thongs and leaving nothing to the imagination. Some people might think I'm being old-fashioned, but I think it's just a reflection of the waywardness and the decay of the world that we live in. And so as disappointing as it is to see, I'm honestly just not surprised, but I also think that then the call for the Christian is becoming increasingly more obvious because there's just that split happening in the secular world versus those that are called to live set apart and to not live by the standards of the world. But I got thinking about this while I was away because I was just considering what to pack and I was reflecting on my own relationship with swimsuits and bikinis, and I realized that I think it feels like at times, and I say this cautiously, but I feel like at times we have been duped in Christian culture into treating, I guess, bikinis and swimsuits and leggings and gym shorts as sinful in and of themselves. When in actuality, if we zoom out, these things are not sinful in and of themselves. Nowhere in scripture does it outline for us that bikinis are inherently sinful. And I do think that there are cases that it could be appropriate with certain styling or certain occasions for the Christian woman to wear these sorts of things. And so that's the angle that I want to take with today's video. Maybe in the future I'll do a video on leggings and gym shorts and gym attire culture because I feel like that's a whole rabbit trail that we could go down. But for the sake of today's video, let's just stick to bikinis and swimsuits. And I realized that as I was thinking about this video and what I was going to share, that most of the messaging that I've experienced as a Christian woman on the internet is that bikinis are simply not permissible and they should have no place in the Christian girl's closet. And while I do understand where that instinct comes from, as I know I can feel myself at times falling into that extreme. And I think at the heart of it, it does come from a sincere place to protect holiness and purity and avoid compromise, which is all good. But the issue that I see is that when we start creating blanket rules where scripture is not explicitly spoken, we risk falling into legalism. And that's a very dangerous place for us to land because once we shift from this is my conviction to this must be the rule for everyone, we subtly then elevate our personal conviction to that which is outlined in scripture. And so navigating these things with grace is really important. We experience conviction in varying areas and varying degrees and varying seasons, and some women genuinely feel a conviction around wearing a bikini at all. And I feel like I should just add the disclaimer that when I say bikini, I'm referring to really any sort of swimsuit that's really revealing. Girls, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. There are some one pieces that are more revealing than if you were to wear a two piece with more fabric. And so use your discretion in how I'm talking about swimsuits in general in this video. But anyway, for the women that feel that genuine conviction, it would be a sin for them to cross that line of conscience. Whereas for others, after prayer and honest evaluation of their motives, they may not feel that same restraint. And both can sincerely be seeking to honor the Lord. Romans 14 is a great chapter to consider in light of all of this. Paul is addressing disputes within the church around things like food laws and observing certain days. These are things that, they're not moral issues like idolatry or adultery or anything like that, but these are matters of the conscience. And I have Romans 14:5 written down here. It says, each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. So there's a level of personal conviction that we must be discerning of when it comes to our conduct and things like this. Yet at the same time, we are told later on in Romans 14 to not cause your brother to stumble. And so for women, it's not out of a responsibility, but it's out of a love for our brother that we consider how we present ourselves. And I would even say out of a love for our sister too. It may cause confusion for a less mature believer to see us presenting ourselves in a way that is perceived to be careless or dishonoring to the Lord. So in all of this, and in topics like this where we have Christian liberty, grace is essential, because what convicts you may not convict me in the same way, and what the Lord presses on your heart in one season may shift in another. And as long as we're not violating clear biblical principles on modesty and self-control and love, we're in the clear. We just need to be cautious that we are not shaming others where Scripture has not given a clear prohibition. Now, I say all of that knowing that some of you are listening to this and are hearing what I'm not saying. So let me just clearly come out and share my own perspective on wearing bikinis as Christians, because I don't want this to be misunderstood. I don't want someone to think like, oh, she doesn't care about modesty, or she's a free grace abuser, or she just wears whatever she wants. No, we absolutely have a role to play as women. That's the message that most women don't want to hear. And just as a sort of side note, I even feel that your physique does play a role in this to some degree. Curves do affect the way certain things look, and so there is a personal responsibility as women in dressing modestly for our body type. There's a very real reality that what looks a certain way on one body type will look very different on another. And ultimately, I'm disinterested in rules just for the sake of rules, and I can't find anywhere in Scripture that says bikinis are from the devil, but we can deduce certain things from Scripture. I have 1 Timothy 2:9 written down here. It says, women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel with modesty and with self-control. And so even with that in view, like, I don't really see how wearing a bikini on a beach vacation with your family, I don't see that fitting under the umbrella of being a respectable or modest choice. Now we're drifting into personal conviction territory. This is my opinion. I do think that if you are on your honeymoon or you're on a trip with your husband and there is a private pool or a quiet beach you want to go to and you want to wear something that's a little bit more fun, let's say, just to keep things family friendly here, I think that's great. Good, fun, fine, and dandy. You should be able to do that as long as it doesn't cross the line of conscience for you. Are there situations outside of that the Christian woman can wear a bikini? Sure, maybe, I don't know, probably. I think if you're tanning in your backyard and nobody can see you, that would be fine. What about a girls' trip? I don't know. I think at some point it does just kind of feel unnecessary. I think about, would I feel comfortable sharing the gospel with somebody in me dressing like this? I don't know. I don't think so. I think at some point it starts to feel like a distraction. Also, I just think ultimately, don't you want to save it for your husband and showing off in a way that really only serves him? I also think as we consider how our world is dying, the call to be set apart for believers is becoming increasingly more and more countercultural. So it might actually be the fact that wearing a more modest swimsuit does convey to the world around you that you are a woman of high standards and you're set apart and you're unwilling to compromise. And that can open the door to share the gospel with somebody, which we should be more concerned about anyways as Christians, rather than just feeling cute or feeling on trend. So I guess my point in sharing all of this is that at times we can be very black and white with our perspectives. It is easier to say that bikinis are off the table and you should never wear one as a Christian, rather than taking the time to consider, well, maybe there is a time and place that it would be less inappropriate to wear one. But ultimately, when it comes to conversations like this, we should be focusing on what Scripture actually says. We know that Scripture is sufficient for us, but unfortunately, Scripture does not give us a clear list of do's and don'ts when it comes to modern clothing items like this, which means we're often forced to do what mature believers have always done, and it is to apply the clear biblical principles that we see in Scripture to our modern situations with wisdom and with grace and humility. And I think the danger in conversations like this is that we tend to often fall on one of two sides. On one side, you have license, and it says, if it's not explicitly forbidden, then it's automatically fine. And that's not a biblical way to reason. The New Testament calls us to self-control, to sobriety of mind, to holiness in our conduct and speech. But then on the other side, you have legalism. If it makes me uncomfortable, or if I wouldn't do it, then it's automatically sin for everyone. And that's also not biblical. That binds the conscience where God has not. But in all of this, it's good for us to remember Romans 14. There are matters where believers can land differently without either person being rebellious. Oh, I believe I have a visitor here.
Yes. Hello, sweetie. How are ya?
And just as a closing thought, I will say, if you are a Christian woman and you're considering whether bikinis are okay or not, I hope this video in some way, shape, or form either encourages you or gives you a framework or just gives you some things to think through when it comes to discerning your own conviction around a topic like this. I did write down a few questions you can ask and prayerfully consider for yourself. The first one is, am I acting in faith before God, or am I trying to satisfy something else? Is my aim to be seen, or is my aim to be faithful? Does this choice reflect self-control and dignity, or does it over-prioritize fashion and aesthetics and trends? And am I considering my brothers and sisters in love because I am called to build up the body? And I'll just end with what I said earlier, that context matters. I do not see a compelling biblical case that a bikini is inherently sinful in every context at all times for all women, but I do see a compelling case that modesty is an important virtue and is not optional for the Christian. And this isn't some sort of fashion preference, but it is an expression of the fruit of self-control. And so if your conscience doesn't permit it, then do not violate it. And if you believe you have freedom, and I'll just add in parentheses, like in a limited context, then exercise that freedom in a way that it's marked by wisdom and restraint rather than entitlement and abusing grace. And ultimately, remember that regardless of the situation that we find ourselves in, our aim is to honor and to reflect the heart of Christ in a broken and fallen world.